Hey guys, I hope you're doing well. So today we're going to be looking at the Salford Quays case study. This is under theme 2, People of the UK, and it's part of paper 1, Living in the UK Today. The exam paper is worth 30% of your final GCSE. It's an hour long and it's 60 marks. So let's take a quick look at what the examiner wants us to know. They want us to know that there are different causes and consequences for development within the UK. In this case, development refers to improving the area, which could be through services, infrastructure, or the economy. The improvements could be social, economic, or environmental improvements. Now, there is some prior knowledge that you need here, touching on the fact that there are differences in the UK regarding development. Some areas are more developed than others. One of those reasons could be, for example, geographical location. If you're in a mountainous region, you might find there are fewer people living there, so there's less of a demand for services or transport links. Another thing could be, if you're in a mountainous region, it's actually quite difficult to develop the area. It might be difficult to build those transport links in the first place. We need to look at the consequences of economic growth for one place in the UK. In this case, we're looking at Salford Quays. We're looking at the impacts of the development that occurred in Salford Quays. What were the social, economic, and environmental consequences of that development? So let's introduce Salford Quays first. It's a city located just a few miles from Manchester, right around here. It's home to about 200,000 people, and it began its life as a heavily industrialised area. It focused on imports and exports because it was at the head of the Manchester Ship Canal. Over the last 30 years, improvements have been made to transform the area from this to this. But before we look at what improvements were made and the impacts they had, we have to look at why the place declined economically in the first place. So let's look at the history of Salford Quays. During the Industrial Revolution, Manchester became a centre for processing cotton. In 1894, the Manchester Ship Canal opened, which allowed larger ships to make its way through the city. Because of this, thousands of people were employed, and a community of homes, factories, and shops developed. Unfortunately, it did not last long, as in the 60s and 70s, large container ships that were developed could no longer use the Manchester Ship Canal, and the area unfortunately fell into decline. 3,000 jobs were lost, and the docks closed in 1982. The land that was left behind was derelict and polluted. There were high rates of unemployment and crime that followed, and the area fell into social, economic, and environmental decline. So to deal with the economic decline, in 1985, the Salford Quays Development Plan was launched. This at the time was to be one of the first and the biggest development and regeneration projects the UK had seen, and it included several different ideas. One of those that came to fruition was the Lowry Building. It was an 1,800-seat theatre, galleries, bars, cafes were included, and it cost £64 million in the year 2000. Also had a £19 million retail and leisure facility put in, and other infrastructure was also put in to support. The tram and metro link was developed in 1999, linking it with the city that was only a few miles away. One of the most important things that Salford Quays did was that it moved several different media departments there. On Pier 9, Media City UK was built. At the time, it cost £550 million. 5 BBC departments moved there, as a result, 10,000 jobs were created, adding £1 billion to the economy in 2013. And that was not all. There was so much more to come. Salford Quays put its foot forward when it came to water sports. Kayaking, canoeing, swimming, triathlons, it all happened in Salford Quays, bringing lots of tourism to the area. In addition, residential areas were also built. We had townhouses and flats, as well as high-rise buildings to deal with the lack of space, therefore attracting young professionals looking for a better quality of life in a prosperous region. Now, this is all very well and good, but remember, the examiner wants us to look at the consequences of this economic improvement. So let's have a look now at what impacts occurred as a result of this residential, environmental, economic, and social improvements that occurred in Salford Quays. So one of the things that they did was they improved the level of employment opportunities in the area through services, businesses, or companies moving there or being created there. However, you need to now think about who benefited from these employment opportunities. A lot of the employment opportunities created were either tertiary or quaternary, so that would be service-related, media-related, or research-related. But the people in the area were working in the docks or were working in the manufacturing industry, so that's the secondary sector. Would they have had the correct qualification and skill level to be considered for the new employment opportunities being provided? Would they have benefited at all? Also, you think about the residential properties that were created. There were loads of homes and flats available, which is fantastic, providing housing for people. However, with the house prices increased due to the attractiveness of the area, was it then too expensive for the people living in the area to relocate? Was it just attracting young professionals from surrounding cities who found Salford Quays to be slightly cheaper than living in large cities like Manchester? Were there homes created that were useful for families in the area? You have to think about, was this beneficial to the people of Salford Quays, or was it just attracting other people and therefore improving the area, but at what cost? There was also a lot of water sports, as you saw, kayaking, canoeing, swimming, which would have brought in fantastic levels of tourism and then resulted in the multiplier effect. The multiplier effect is essentially where spending money generates more money. So let's just say you go as a tourist, you go spend money in a shop. The shop owner then has more money, so he spends money in a restaurant. The restaurant owner then has more money and he spends money here or there. So the multiplier effect is essentially money generating more and more economic activity, which is fantastic. But having so many people in the area, would that have led to traffic congestion, pollution, both air and waste? However, undoubtedly, there were some fantastic environmental improvements done to the canals and the waterways. There had been huge amounts of ship pollution that had occurred previously, and so they had separated those docks off from the canals, which is fantastic. They had aerated the water using a mixed air compression system, which then allowed 12,000 fish to be introduced into the canals. Those fish are still thriving today, so fantastic environmental improvements were done in this case. Okay, so let's take what we've just learned and practice it on an exam question. This question is a 6-marker and it reads, with reference to a named case study, describe the responses to economic decline and evaluate the level of success. So let's translate some of the keywords first before we translate the full question. One of the keywords in the exam command was is describe. And so we want to describe, we just want to say what we see. We want to just say what was going on in Salford Quays, give a few facts, give a few figures, give a bit of detail. Next, it says responses. Now, responses, we're going to be focusing on the improvements that were made. And the improvements that were made were in reference to any economic decline that occurred. In this case, the economic decline was the docks closing. Now, the latter half of this exam question says, evaluate the level of success. Anytime you see the word evaluate, we want to weigh up the good and the bad. So we want to focus on the positives and negatives of any of the improvements made. In terms of success, well, was it an economic success? Was it an environmental success? Or was it a social success? So let's translate the exam question and see what we're looking at. For Salford Quays, what were the improvements made? And was it good or bad overall? That's what the question is asking us. That's what we need to be answering. Okay, so let's make a start on the introduction. So in the introduction, I would most likely locate the area. I would talk about where Salford Quays is located, and I would focus on what the decline was. So I'd refer to the docks closing, 3,000 jobs being lost, the poor environment in terms of the contamination, the air pollution, the crime. I would just set the scene for the examiner. I would then refer to any of the improvements or responses to Salford Quays and what was done in this case. So one example we could use is Media City UK, where 10,000 jobs were created. An example being sort of BBC departments being media focused. So that's fantastic, jobs being created. That means lots of people have money in the area, fantastic. However, I would then balance it up by talking about who were the jobs for. Would the people in the area have benefited from this, or was this actually just attracting young professionals from elsewhere in the country or the region? Another thing I would focus on is the Salford Quays development plan, which was created in 1985, and it focused on the development of houses, flats, and so on. I then focused on, this is fantastic, we're giving housing for the people in the area, but who were the houses for? I would also talk about maybe gentrification, and were they too expensive for the people living in the area? Remember, the people in the area were not working in high-level employments at the time. They were working in the secondary sector, manufacturing, which maybe was not generating as much income. And so were these homes, were these flats expensive for people who actually lived in Salford Quays? I'd finally maybe finish off by talking about the water sports and the tourism, which is excellent, maybe referring to the multiplier effect, and then focus on the impact of pollution in terms of waste and air pollution and traffic congestion, lots of things going on there. Finally, you want to finish off with a conclusion, very, very basic, because this is, remember, it's only a 6-mark question, so we're looking for maybe one sentence just to wrap it up. Overall, good or bad? What do you think? Overall, were the improvements of Salford Quays worth it or not worth it? Okay, so that covers Salford Quays and touches on a practice question. So hopefully that made a little bit more sense to you. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments, send me an email, and I'll get back to you. But apart from that, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.